Well, it's the greatest play about baseball ever written by a playwright from Fullerton. I knew I knew one person that I went to Fulton College with. He was a theater student, and he left for San Francisco for a couple of years, and he came back down, and he was wanted to do a play in downtown Fullerton, and I saw this play, and I met some of the people involved in the company, and it turned out they were, a couple of them, Michael Malo and Stephen Lamprinos, were thinking of writing a play about the Beat generation, Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, William S. Burroughs, which happened to be kind of a fascination of mine. And I just kind of helped them start writing it, and it just seemed really natural and easy, writing the dialogue and all that, because I'd been a reporter already for about 10 years, and you deal with dialogue quite a bit as a reporter. You're talking to people and quoting them and that. And there's a similarity in playwriting, and I think that's kind of what, it's a kind of an effortless sort of different kind of writing, but similar in that respect. And just been, I was pretty involved for about 10 years writing plays, and I haven't done anything new in 14 years maybe. But it's percolating, let's say. There's something great in there. A deadline, pretty much. If I've got a deadline, and I used to help run the theater in Fullerton, and then I had a good relationship with Stages in Fullerton as well, and Patrick and I started working together around 2000, and he would say, "Yeah, I'd like to direct a play of yours, in the next season." And I said, "Well, okay, give me a deadline, and I'll get it done." And that I'm not being facetious. That really does, because I always have ideas, floating in my head, but, give me a deadline and I can kind of focus on that. I want to tell a story for sure, but I also want it to mean something, at least to me. Well, I was always a baseball fan, and I had an uncle who was kind of a shady character, never really knew what he did for a living. He supported himself sometimes by gambling, playing cards, but I think he was always involved in some sort of shady shenanigans. But he never had any money, but when he did, he was really generous, and he would just pop up out of the blue sometimes. And I was around 10 or 11 maybe, and he had a bag full of gifts, and he gave me a tabletop baseball game called Superstar Baseball. Just a simple game, 3 die and player cards and all that. And these players were all legendary real-life baseball figures. And on the back of their cards, it was pretty much biographical information, records they had set, how long they played and all that. But there was one card, and it was one line on it, and it was just different from the rest, and it said, one of the most dominating pitchers of his generation, one of the strangest men to ever play baseball. And that was Rube Waddell's. And that just stuck with me, and I was like, well, why does this guy get singled out? There's been a lot of colorful characters and all that. But that kind of laid the seed, I guess. And why I chose to write about him, I don't know. I think maybe because he's sort of a misfit of sorts, kind of a larger than life sort of character, but also one that obviously had a ferocious drinking problem. Some have conjectured he might have had some kind of mental illness, or maybe short attention span, ADHD, whatever that is. But why I chose to write about him, I'm not quite sure, but I'm glad I did. Well, the story of the play is really, it's kind of a memory play in the sense that Grantland Rice, who also was a real figure, a legendary sports writer in the 1920s and 30s, the biggest sports writer in America at the time. In my play, there's a scene a little bit after the play starts, where Rice is a Cub reporter, and he wants to interview Rube Waddell, and he goes out to a Philadelphia athletics practice, and he talks to Connie Mack, and Mack just sort of, there's no story here. Rube is just like everybody else. And he basically just kind of, shoos Rube away. I'm sorry, Grantland Rice away, and Rice doesn't get a story, but then we flash forward about 20 years or so. Rice is now a seasoned, very known journalist, and he wants to, and Rube has been dead for about 10 years, and he wants to go back and kind of find out who the real Rube Waddell was, because Rube was a great pitcher that posted all these incredible statistics. I think the record for most strikeouts by an American League left-hander is still owned by him, and that's pretty amazing, because that was more than 100 years ago. But there were also all these outlandish tales, all these crazy exploits and deeds that Rube did. There was one a lot of them, they haven't really been sort of proven. They might have been like urban myths or whatever that just grew over the years. But for instance, how Rube would, if he was on the pitching mound and if you heard a fire truck go by, they didn't have, they might have had bells, I guess, at that time. He would throw off his uniform and run off, and he'd be wearing red suspenders. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But that was a story that grew up around him, and it was retold over and over. And all kinds of other ones. He would dive into burning buildings, not dive. He would run into burning buildings and rescue puppies. Or, and speaking of puppies, opposing teams would bring puppies into the dugout to try to distract him. So he had this like sort of childish air about him, but he was also a big guy and a lot of strength and all that. But. So Rice decides to go back and find out who the real Rube Waddell was. And so he interviews the guys who played with him and his manager and other people that knew him. And it turns out all he's getting are more and more tall stories, and the stories are even bigger. Now it's like Rube didn't just chase after fire engines. He invented the hot dog. Or he wrote "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," and it's just so there's kind of a reason for that. It's sort of like a journalist's stock and trade not stock and trade, but it's about objective truth and being accurate and all that. And as far as Rube goes, it's all subjective, and all Rice wants to do is find the truth about him, and he finds that truth is really, really elusive. So that's really not the story, because it does follow Rube's career, but it's all in past tense, if it makes any sense. And we jump around the time from Rube's early days to Rice 10 years after Rube's dead, and it goes back and forth. But I think it's fairly easy to follow because Patrick has done a really good job at streamlining that and not being too worried about it. I would suppose it depends on what you're writing. If you were writing an autobiography and you wanted it to be spot on and accurate and research and all that, that's got to be difficult. But in this play, because the conceit, I guess, of it is that in trying to find the truth of a person behind the legend, Rice doesn't find the truth, and he kind of wrestles with that. As a writer, as a journalist, he really wants it. But because of that, because the main, not the main character, I guess Rube would be, but Rice is what drives the play, he can't find the truth. So that kind of freed me up as a playwright to kind of play around with it as all. I mean, the play is called Rube with an exclamation point, but under it says a play about baseball heavily fictionalized. So we absolutely take great liberties with that, like the stories I told you a little bit earlier about inventing the hot dog. Of course, Rube didn't do that. And we have players who knew Rube or played with him, but they weren't on the same team with him in that year. So it's Ida Tarbell, who was a legendary, pioneering investigative journalist. She's a character in this play. I doubt if she ever, had even heard of Rube Waddell. But and Ty Cobb is I guess you could say the main villain of the play. And Rube and he met or faced each other quite a bit. But as far as his role in this play, that's completely made up. So that made it easier. Because I had some background, because Rube was a real person, so I could incorporate some of the things that were real about him, but I also had, free reign to add whatever I wanted. Well, I hope the audience enjoys it, and maybe I wouldn't be so presumptuous to ask them to think, because that's up to everybody else, but to maybe think about their own stories in life. This is a play about stories quite a bit. Rice is a storyteller, and Rube had tons of stories. And there's some illusions in the play, especially toward the end, that, the only thing we have are stories. They're the things that kind of we tell ourselves who we are, our interactions with the world, and, everybody's got a story, and I guess the only real question is whether you're living the story, telling the story that you want to. I think the Southern California theater audience has to come to this play because it's about baseball, and who doesn't love baseball? Yeah, it's a play about baseball, but it's also a play about stories, and weirdly, it's a play about contemporary America, believe it or not. There's actually some allusions or some scenes in this play that are set against the backdrop of the social agitation of the first decade of the 20th century, and it's pretty amazing how those issues are still here. Whether that's the reason why they should come, they should come because they're going to have a good time.
The Curtis Theater, I lived in Brea. I grew up from about 9 years old in Brea, 9 to probably 17 or so. And so I knew about the Curtis Theater for years. I've been doing plays here, I've done probably three other shows here in probably the last 10 years or so, but I've done a lot at some other Orange County theaters, some theater in LA. And so I found out about this show. A friend of mine from one of the other theaters that I work at is directing, and he said he was doing this show, so I came down and auditioned. I like working with him, so thought I'd come down and see what it was all about. Well, this play, so the playwright, Joel Beers. I love Joel Beers. I've done probably 4 other shows that he's written, and so what I thought about this play is that it's about baseball. I like baseball, love baseball, so I thought, let's go check it out. And I knew there were some meaty characters in there, and came down to give it a try. Joel Beers is fairly prolific. I mean, the man can write. And he runs a gambit, right, of different types of plays and genres, and there's no truly one thing that he does. He's got his hand in everything. I mean, you've got this is a play about baseball, essentially a highly fictionalized play about baseball, obviously, but he's done some other things. One of the other shows I did of his, Roscoe Spitzer's Afraid of Dying. It's a show that takes on big pharma and antidepressants and things like that in a very interesting, fun way. So Joel, you just can't go wrong, in my opinion, with Joel. And I know that they've done this play before. This is, I think, the 3rd iteration of the play. And everyone who's ever done it, I'm friends with a lot of them, and they still talk about it fondly to this day. So I thought it'd be a great experience. So I play Ty Cobb, and the story arc of Ty in the play is we really only meet him a couple of times in the play. The first time we meet him is with Rube in a barbershop, and he comes in to try and get him to promote Coca-Cola, because it's an Atlanta-based company, he's from Georgia, and so he has stock in the company, and that's, in real life, Ty Cobb made a mint on Coca-Cola stock. So at this point in the play, and I don't know if it's fictional or true, but he's wanting Rube to promote Coca-Cola, but he doesn't want to do it because Ty Cobb's a racist jackass, basically. So all of that comes to light, and it really sets off the rivalry between them. And then within that, there's the secondary arc, which is obviously later, many years later, when they meet on the field. And I think it's for the pennant game where Ty's just got him reeling from talking at him, and he jacks that homer over the fence, grand slam home run to win the game, which kind of sends Rube into the spiral. Well, he's already spiraling, but it completes his spiral, basically. In my opinion, it's unique in that it's not really about sports. Sure, there's some sports segments, but it's really about a man in baseball, and that was his passion, obviously, but it's who was the man underneath all of that? What were his relationships? Where did he go? What did he do? And a lot of it is outside of baseball, to be honest with you. But it's really interesting to see the sports segments come alive in a staged way, because when you think about it, you've got a baseball diamond, right? You've got outfielders, pitcher. It's a huge thing. But with this, we've got to do it in about 10 feet of space. So Patrick has really taken that on and done some really interesting staging with it. I think very dramatic, and it plays well, and it plays to the audience. I think after having read it, I'd want people to get out of the play that who are people really? It's really a collection of stories. It's hard to know exactly who someone is, and do you really need to know exactly who they are? Is the story sometimes more important than who they truly were? It's really how people are remembered. I mean, it's my outlook on death as well. It's not who you were. It's who are the people you affected, and what did you leave behind, right? How do people talk about it? And I think with Rube, and you see that in the stories that are told on stage. Did that really happen? Heck if I know, but it's a heck of a story. That I think is the key to it. It's really just about life. It's about one guy, but it's about his life, not not necessarily baseball in particular. Oh well, I think they have to come because it's going to be a great show. I mean, the actors in it are fantastic. People are uber prepared. You know, they're on stage, they're passionate, and I think we're going to tell a great story. And in this setting, I think it's going to be awesome.
I actually have done some shows at the Curtis in the past, many years ago. I think I did Can't Take It With You here, and then also Hair, the musical Hair, a long time ago. And then the play itself, I am actually one of the only people in the cast that has done the play before, in its two other incarnations. I've been in every production of it. And I was personal friends with the writer. And so I came out and auditioned for it, and then been lucky enough to been able to do it every time it's been done. Well, Joel's real great because he pulls a lot of his material from real life. He's a real observationalist. Oftentimes in his pieces, when I'm watching a play or if I'm reading one of his scripts, I am like, wait a minute, I think I remember this incident. He'll find a way to make real life incidents. He'll find a way to fit them in to his plays, and that just makes them, to me, more relatable to your average person. And that's especially with this play. He's taken historical characters, real people, but created some fantasy about them, but still made them very down to earth and very relatable. And I just think he's really good at that as a playwright. This is making his characters very relatable to his audience. Well, I'm a big baseball fan myself. So, and I love theater. So when I hear that there's a play that's also about baseball, that's two of my favorite things right there. I didn't know a lot about Rube Waddell, the real person. So I found it fascinating to learn about him and then read the script and learn about him. That just kind of pulled me in. The idea that you can write a play about baseball, but you don't have to know anything about baseball to enjoy the play. To me, that's what kind of I find interesting and fascinating. I play Ida Tarbell, who was a real journalist back in the mid 1900s. I think she passed in 1936. She was a real muckraker. She really liked to advocate for change, for social change. And at the time, that was that was before civil rights. That was before people picketing and protesting. Writing about it was a way to protest, was a way to shine a light on things that weren't right and weren't fair in society. And I'm fascinated by her character. And her implementation in this play is that she plays the love interest to Rube, besides his love of baseball and of drink and of fishing. She is one of his many loves. But she shines a light on a lot of what was going on at the time that Rube was alive, and a lot that was going on at the time that the play is set in. Women's suffrage, segregation, she's kind of the spotlight to the important political and socioeconomical things that were going on, and that's kind of her purpose. So she shines a light on that. She helps carry Rube through an arc up to something bigger than he ever thought he could be. He never really cared much about anything other than fishing and playing baseball, and she introduces him to a side of the world that he maybe should be taking mind to, and it kind of is a nod to everyone that is watching the play that, hey, maybe you should be taking taking notice of what's going on around you in your life, and what can you do to offer your 2 cents to help make it a better world. What I would love for people who come to see this play, first and foremost, is I would love for them to just have a great time, because the play is a lot of fun. And it's almost like a roller coaster. It moves pretty fast. It takes you from one fun moment to the next. But it's also highlighting a lot about our past that we maybe forgotten, or we want to have forgotten. The unfairness that with segregation and women's rights, the unfairness, the way even baseball players were treated before there were unions. So I hope most off that they have a lot of fun, but that it also makes them think. That it makes them think that the social injustices that we still struggle with today, that things can change and get better. If you look at our past, you see that if you work hard enough, if you care enough, things can get better and can change. And I think that's a good thing to walk out of the theater with, with a little bit of hope and a little bit of happiness. They must come see it, because like I said, it's a blast. It is a fun piece. It's original. I've never seen anything on stage like it. Like I said, it moves really fast. It's a play about baseball. There's not a lot of those out there. There's damn Yankees, but that, I think they were singing in that, right? It's not just a lot of fun, but it's, like I said, it carries a lot of important things that we need to remember from our past. And I think that's as important for everybody to come see this, to be reminded of where we came from and where we can go. And I think they should come see it for that. And they're going to have a good time too.
Joel Beers had mentioned he was doing a play about baseball that he had done before, revived it from like 15 years ago. And I grew up a baseball player, so before I even wanted to be an actor, it was kind of like a dream come true. So he approached me, saw me in a production, and he wanted me to come read for it and come audition. So as fate would have it, got to play the title role, so it's pretty exciting. I've been gearing up for it for quite some time, but it's finally all coming together. And because we don't have any, there's no audio to go off of, and there's no real video footage. There's like archival video footage, but nothing of the Athletics that I could find, the Philadelphia Athletics of 1904, 05, 06. But the challenge is to keep him respectable, right, throughout the whole thing, but just human at the same time, right, and making sure people. Honestly, the biggest challenge was I'm a right-hander, I'm a righty, so teaching myself, learning how to throw the throwing motion from my left hand has been the biggest challenge, but one that I have had a lot of fun with, just trying to get it into the groove and hopefully do it some justice. Rube Waddell was he was fascinating, and in a time where a lot of stuff maybe went kind of undiagnosed as far as like mental incapacities or stuff like that. He was so eccentric, and I think his arc throughout the play is just it's kind of a roller coaster ride, but he's got a lot of loves. Rube had 4 major loves, and it was baseball, I think, first and foremost. Fishing came a very close second, and fire trucks. Not just fire trucks, but he was a volunteer firefighter, and he loved a lot of things. But I think those 3, and then when Tarbell came along, I think that was the straw that kind of broke the camel's back, and he was figuratively putting all his chips in. Because he wanted that, because he felt, and baseball was so high on the list because not only did he have his identity there, but he had a family there, and these guys were not just his teammates, but they were his brothers, and I can attest to that. Like that feeling is one that is pretty powerful and doesn't go away. When you don't have that, it can be tough. It can be tough to survive. But yeah, I would say baseball, fishing, eye to Tarbell, and fighting fires. Right, he's got a lot of loves, and I think his identity was found obviously mostly in baseball because he was good at it. But he had a lot more than just a fiery left arm. He had a big heart, and a lot of it is based on legend and myth and that kind of stuff. But you know, a lot of the facts that history kind of presents itself is that yeah, he had compassion for people outside of, and he didn't really, there was no place, no time where it wasn't appropriate to help someone. So I think that's pretty cool. He's all over the place in a lot of good ways. He had his demons, like we all do, dealt with those things, and ultimately it was his end. But for the time that he was, I mean, just based on the stats alone, it's kind of incredible. I mean, I'm a huge Dodgers fan, so for him to have the career or the season strikeout record until Sandy Koufax came along, it's pretty incredible for that to hold up for that long. And then just some of the legends that you hear, it's an absolute honor to be able to play somebody like that. So I want him to just have fun, and I just sitting back doing some of these rehearsals, these preliminary, and now gearing up for the opening. I feel like sometimes I am watching a baseball game. You know, I'm at the stadium, and that's how I want people to feel. You know, I'd love for people to come away with like they just saw sort of the highlight reel of baseball's sort of startup, and this eccentric character who came in pretty fast and was gone just as fast. But yeah, it's pretty amazing because it's for the whole family. It really is. It's a family show that it's just fun, and by the end of it, I think you'll have a better appreciation for some of these historical figures. So it's timely. It's really timely. It touches on so many things, but at the end, you know, it's a highly fictionalized play. But by the end, you feel like you have a better understanding for America's pastime, really. And again, I'm a little biased because my Dodgers are on the way. Hopefully this will be the year. But you walk away with a better appreciation for that, and some of these figureheads who founded the game, you know, the coaches, just all the people. And it's timely because of the social climate at that time as well. And this play touches on that significantly. And Rube is kind of like a little bystander all the way throughout. But yeah, I think you'd be doing yourself a disservice not to come see it. So.